Good morning, everyone. I don't mean to be a bummer. Somebody said, "Oh man, you're really bumming me out today." I was like, "Yeah, me too, kind of." Hard to get to the end of the show some days and be like, we're really going to turn this one around. But no, I'm not meaning to bum you out. And it is supposed to be a fun show, right? Kind of, sort of. Anyway, the backbenchers, the NDP, are willing to prop up the Liberals' speech law. Probably. But there might actually be something we can do about that. But first, I wanted to show you this. I told you, or I mentioned a little while ago that I'd won one, right? And here's the Black Anti-Racism Change Starts Now Black Heritage Society in Guelph's flyer for their event that's happening today. And the event that's happening it's this weekend, 29th to May 2nd. April 29th to May 2nd, and it says, "This anti-racism summit is an inclusive event and all are welcome to attend." And my sticking point was that they were saying that this is a black-only event. And so I had signed up. I mentioned that I had signed up. So today I got the email, and it says, "Good morning. Thank you for registering for this event tonight at 6 p.m. This meeting is exclusively for black identifying individuals and their families." Huh. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange? Isn't that racist? Isn't that racist? This is the Canada that they're working towards. This is what they want, and this is supposed to be inclusive, and this is being funded by the city of Guelph. Tax dollars are going to this. I find it very odd. I find it very odd, and I find it very offensive too. Right? Like there was a lot of work, a lot of energy went into moving to a society where everyone was treated equally under the law, and now we've got a situation where people can accept city tax dollars and run segregated events. And I'm seen as the bad one for saying, this is not what I want my tax dollars going to. This is a whole bunch of racist garbage. But anyway, hot racist garbage. What are you going to do? What are you going to do, right? Write a letter. It's all right. Gets me on a list or two. Oh well. Brian Lilly says, having the government decide which websites from outside of Canada we can see, deciding what we can post, and regulating our TikTok or Facebook videos. It doesn't sound Canadian, but it's what Justin Trudeau is trying to do. Read and retweet. So here's the Sun article. Trudeau's internet censorship bill must be stopped. If the idea of the government controlling what you can read online and what you can post online and what videos you can view doesn't strike you as quite right, then you might be a Canadian. Sadly, it's the government of Canada that's now putting forward legislation to give itself the type of powers we normally associate with basic dictatorships like China. Bill C-10, currently before the House of Commons, would give the government the power to regulate any content you generate and post online. Your video ranting on Twitter, dancing on TikTok, or pontificating on Facebook would be treated as a radio or television broadcaster. Previously, the legislation had an exemption for user-generated content, but that was stripped out at the behest of the Liberals last week. This is a remarkable and damaging step in an already bad piece of legislation, writes Michael Geist. Geist is a law professor at the University of Ottawa and the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law. This means he not only knows what he's talking about on this issue, but the federal government agrees, funding his work and research. Well, we just realized, I just went through an example of what taxpayer dollars, and that's what federal funding is, taxpayer dollars, can go to. So, that might not be as resounding an endorsement as you think it is, right? Considering what we just saw. Okay, but anyway, I wanted to give a little context there. His assessment, back to the article, of this bill is brutal but accurate. Quote, the government believes that it should regulate all user-generated content, leaving it to the regulator to determine on what terms and conditions will be attached. The videos of millions of Canadians on sites like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and hundreds of other services, he said Geist. That's wild. That's wild. This bill won't put Canada in the same position as China, but it does put us on the same path and gives the government all the tools they need for total internet control. As much as we want to think it wouldn't be the cat video that our grandma would post or maybe a friend would post, it is in fact those things that could be regulated should the CRTC wish to intrude. Conservative MP Rachel Harder told me Wednesday. Her party will oppose the bill, but the NDP has said it's open to supporting it. Yikes. If that happens, Harder predicts the constitutional challenge. Section 2B protects us and our ability to speak freely, Harder said. Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms states that everyone has freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication. I mean, it says it right in there. They're going to. I don't know if the federal government has a notwithstanding clause. I know the provincial governments have the notwithstanding clause. Like, notwithstanding this violation of your rights, we're going to do this anyway. I don't know if the federal government has something that can just do that. And if that thing is independent of the Oakes test, right? Like independent of the testing that goes into suspending a charter right. Anyway, Brian Lilly finishes off with, it's time for the government to stop and walk away from this dangerous legislation. I think it's notable that the media is silent on this. CTV is not saying a note from the editors, this is a dangerous piece of legislation that should be stopped, blah, 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 right? Like the serious anchor who's got the suit and sounds very right, or Michelle Dubé or whoever, whichever anchor you watch, they haven't done that, and there's not been many media pieces. In fact, somebody was saying on Twitter this morning, there's been nothing in the CBC about Bill C-10, despite the fact that like other pieces of other media has picked it up, but nothing from the state broadcaster. Really interesting and notable because it's a very impactful piece of legislation that does violate the charter. And so you'd think that there'd be an editor somewhere, there'd be some newsroom guy who's like, no, we're gonna run with this. Nope, not so much, right? So it's interesting that Brian Lilly is saying time to walk away from this dangerous legislation. Here's what the playbook's going to be though. They are going to have an election. They are vilifying the Conservatives as the other. And it's already like they did the same thing to the PPC in the 2019 election. They're trying to do it to the Conservatives, but the Conservatives are so weak at this point under O'Toole that he's imploding his own party. Like he's poking his he's poking his base in the eye and saying, "Oh, you're still here?" Right? Like it's frustrating because, well, I mean, I'm sure that the Liberals are enjoying this, but it's frustrating because the Greens are on board to do exactly what the NDP are on board, and the Liberals are quite happy to have the support of both of those parties because it means that they can give the appearance of a minority government when actually they have a very strong majority, right? And they really do. Like, the Liberals might trigger an election to get rid of the pesky questions being asked and the procedural stuff that the Conservatives insist on, because with the majority they can ram through a whole lot more, right? With a whole lot less oversight because they'll control all the committees, so they'll just vote everything down, right? Like, oh, and we've got to wrap up because we've got to get this paperwork in because the end of the session is in 3 months, so we got to get this done quick, right? That's the problem. They'll have control, so they may trigger it to get that control, but at the same time, they don't need to. They can get what they need to get through anyway, but the problem is the oversight, right? And even the oversight now is not very good because the Liberals have successfully filibustered a bunch and gotten away with not giving away any answers. So isn't that interesting? Recently as well, Doug Ford announced sick time. We'll get into that in a little bit. The details. It's basically, Laurie Goldstein outlines it here, but he says, can somebody explain how 3 days of paid sick leave, that's what Ontario is offering for this COVID sick time, deters someone who desperately needs the money going to work if they have COVID, and why it wouldn't be better for Ontario to top up the federal plan, which provides COVID-related sick leave for up to a month. Now, the feds basically responded to Ontario. Ontario asked, we'd love to top up your program. Like, let's top up your program. Let's work together and get the people covered, blah, blah, blah. I think they want Doug Ford to fail. We'll talk about Doug Ford at the end of the show. The rumors are swirling. So that's an interesting thing on Redacted on the other platforms. But the Ontario or the federal government said, no, we're not doing this. We're not helping you make your own sick time plan. Sorry about that. So anyway, so Goldstein says, can somebody explain how, can somebody explain how 3 days of paid sick leave deters someone who desperately needs the money going to work if they have COVID, and why it wouldn't be better for Ontario to top up the federal plan, which provides COVID-related sick leave for up to a month? And I know I just said that, but the reason that they're not doing the federal plan is because the feds said no. And I think it's weird that he doesn't know that. But I think that it's also weird that the feds said no. It seems like they want Ford to fail and take responsibility for the failure. That's what it seems like they want. Here is something that's interesting, getting into governance, and this is federal governance. Candice Bergen nails Trudeau, nails him, and I think she's got him dead to rights. And I think like she's got precedent from the early 2000s, which is modern history. The speaker is going to be bound by that precedent. Like, this is what happened during this time, and the speaker is independent. The speaker has to be independent, right? The speaker's all about the House procedure and all that other stuff. So Bergen comes in, says, I think the Prime Minister misled the House intentionally, and she provides the details. It's about Vance's, they call it a Me Too moment. I think this is like calling what happened with Vance a Me Too moment. He fathered 2 children. Like, I don't know that this qualifies as a Me Too moment, other than it has something to do with like sexual dallying and producing children, and maybe it was unwanted and a power situation, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I don't know that that's encapsulated. Maybe that's encapsulated by just saying it's Me Too, but I don't know. But I think that it's weird. So Rand Ridley says, let's get into what's actually going on here. Candace Bergen just presented a point of order in the House of Commons, accusing Trudeau of misleading the House. A very detailed accusation with supporting documents of evidence. This could have very serious consequences. Go watch the whole thing. She starts out, and it's like watching a case. She starts out clearly stating what she thinks about or what was said. So Trudeau said this and then said this, and then outlines why it's important, why misleading the House is important. The whole thing is worth watching. I was at 12 minutes or something like that. Notable. I hate the minus 12 minutes. I hate the Facebook time index. Like it's very annoying. I wish they'd give me what time is left. Anyway, regardless, it's very silly, but worth watching. I think that Bergen and the Conservatives have something very concrete here. I don't know what the resolution is going to be. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of resolution. Teflon Trudeau seems to be able to get out of these things pretty easily with I mean, even SNC-Lavalin. I think SNC-Lavalin was probably the best example. And then I thought there's no way he's going to be able to shuffle Jody Wilson-Raybould out of that position. And then Scott Bryson resigned, right? The things you don't expect, right? Wily Trudeau, Teflon Trudeau. And it's unbelievable, but he gets out of these things. But anyway, I think that Candace Bergen, there's too much for me to show any clip because the context is too much. It's too dense. She does a good job putting it into the 12 or 14 minutes that she puts it into. The most important minutes are probably the first 8. And she nails them. She absolutely, I think she's got it bang on. And I hope that something of substance happens, but I'm not holding my breath. You see what I mean? Yeah. Yep. Ottawa says it only learned Chinese police ran the visa center this year. Oh, did they do anything about it? I don't know. It only learned about Chinese police. That seems unlikely. Right? And I'm pretty sure I saw in 2020, by this year, do they mean like this calendar year? I'm pretty sure I saw in 2020 them saying that they were aware of that and that was usual practice and that agency handled a lot of the immigration situations for a whole bunch of other people and it wasn't a big deal. I'm pretty sure that that's what they said. And it was like a September or late October. No, September, late August-ish, end of the summer. It was supposed to be a big story and again, fizzled out, right? Teflon Trudeau. We knew about this and everybody was fine. And then, we just found out this year being, this calendar year. Weird. This is insufferable. This is the finance minister talking about how it is a feminist budget. Somehow, this is literally a minute of her saying words that have nothing to do with the economy, but she's talking about the economy of Canada. And well, I'll show you an example of that in action in just a minute, but here's the finance minister. Here we go.
We're a feminist government, and we're not shy about saying that. And we have feminist policies in this budget. And to say there is no contradiction.
There's a bit of a contradiction. When you say you're a feminist government, I should get one of those. Je suis féministe, right? When you say you're a feminist government and you wear a feminist t-shirt during the budget with a pearl necklace thing, that was weird. And then you shut down an investigation into the Jonathan Vance things. That's a slight contradiction, Miss Freeland. Isn't it a contradiction? No? Am I misunderstanding the word contradiction? Okay, back to Miss Freeland's breathy, condescending tone and mom head tilt.
between that and having a budget full of smart economic policies. And I would say the key policies in this budget are feminist policies, and at the same time, they are smart economic policies. And to me, putting those things together is maybe the thing I am the most proud of, is kind of saying to Canadians, if we can have policies that empower women entrepreneurs like all of you guys, if we can have policies that make it possible for women to fully participate in the labor force, like early learning and childcare, yeah, that's something feminists have been fighting for more than 50 years.
Is this a fiscal policy? Is this economic? Is this fiscal policy? I don't think so. I don't think so. Here's another interesting example of Catherine McKenna and her. Hold on. Catherine McKenna, who is the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. I wanted to double check what her ministry was called. That's why I always get the infrastructure wrong. It's an I word, and I always forget it. But anyway, the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities is promising to do better. I talked about this yesterday. I'll do better with these financial and fiscal policies that Ms. Freeland, the feminist fiscal policies that Ms. Freeland is talking about. An internal audit released last October found Minister McKenna's department lacked mandatory checklists for due diligence, had serious control failures. Auditors found 32 projects selected at random, 22 had incomplete checklists and a failure rate of 69%. To put that into perspective, imagine working in a jewelry store. You're doing the inventory. After inventory, 69% of gold rings, earrings are gone. There's no trace of them. Same thing. And then you tell the owner, I'll try to do better next time. We are the owners of the jewelry store. We are the people whose tax dollars are being no checklist, no oversight, no papers, no nothing, right? Nothing to prove what was done, no nothing. So this also, to comment on getting people back into the workforce, why can't we encourage women to do what they want to do? Why can't we value the work at home, right? It takes work to run a household. It used to be that one partner worked outside of the household and another partner worked inside the household to raise the children. And that was seen as a valuable job. And a lot of times women like to do that job. Not all the time. I worked in group homes. I worked in children's mental health for a long time, and I really enjoyed that work. But a lot of times it's women who prefer to do that, right? And so because of that, it seems like we're nudging women into doing work that the government finds valuable. But what if, listen, and I've said this a lot, but your accounting office mates aren't going to be there to feed you applesauce on your deathbed, right? Maybe your kids will be, if you're nice to them, if that's something that you want, right? Maybe, if you're lucky, your kids might. But probably not Alice from accounting, right? Probably not the secretary who you see every day. She's probably not going to be there to hold your hand and tell you that the whole life thing was worth living, right? And I don't know the answer to that, but I know that the government constantly working to provide childcare isn't necessarily solving the problem. Just like giving people who are addicted to addiction is just one of the many problems, but giving homeless people a place to live doesn't solve their problems. And it feels like that's the goal, because then we're told that all the problems will be solved. But all that does is it concentrates the problems. And then it costs money to manage the problems. It costs money to staff the facility. It costs money to take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. I know, because I've done the job, right? And so it's a false promise, right? We'll raise your kids. You get out there and produce, right? And then when your kids are grown and don't know you, right? Like, you guys can meet up for dinner sometimes if the government lets you, right? Because right now we're not allowed to do that. So just keep your distance, stay home, stay safe, right? I mean, really, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. So I think it's wrong-headed for the government to continually nudge people to do what they want when what they want is maybe not what's best for the person. Why can't the person make the choice? And if they want to stay home and raise their kids, then let them do that. Let's incentivize that. Let's incentivize that just like STEM, because that's as valuable as STEM, maybe more so, right? Here's Roman Baber. He says, police can't charge with criminal code obstruction when refusal to abide is punishable by a provincial law. I asked Sylvia Jones why she told municipalities to charge with obstruction for violations of Reopening Ontario Act. She said I was a COVID denier. Watch. The question is well said. And basically what he's saying is you can't charge for this different crime if the law that they're breaking has a structure in it that somebody can be charged under. And the Opening Ontario Act has a structure for charges and all of that stuff. So Baber's saying there's precedent, again, legal precedent, to not for this charge to be invalid. Okay, so here's Roman Baber, and I think it's well said. Let's listen to the politicians and the parliamentarians who are actually fighting for us. I think that's worthwhile. So thank you, Mr. Baber. Here we go.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Solicitor General. On September 19th, her ministry sent a memo to all Ontario municipalities advising that a person who refuses to leave premises under the Reopening Ontario Act can be charged either under the ROA or with obstruction of justice under the Criminal Code. A recent article in the Lawyers Daily calls into question the ability to charge with obstruction when trying to enforce a provincial offence, and failure to comply is punishable by the same provincial legislation. This goes back to a well-established principle established by the Supreme Court in a case named Sharma in 1993. When the refusal is prescribed by the provincial legislation, refusal to comply with same provincial legislation cannot form the basis for an obstruction charge. The appropriate procedure is to charge under the provincial law. Speaker, refusing to comply with a police officer's order to close or vacate is an offence punishable by Section 10 of the Reopening Ontario Act. So why did the Solicitor General tell municipalities to press criminal charges for violations punishable by the Reopening Ontario Act?
To reply, the Solicitor General.
Thank you, Speaker. You know, it is truly...
Just before she answers, she doesn't answer the question. She just says how terrible she finds Mr. Baber. And I think I'm going to give her like 10 or 15 seconds just to listen, get a flavor of what she talks about. It's unbelievable that the people who are in charge of governing are not even listening to the well-established legal precedent. Legal precedent is the bedrock that our laws rest on. Basically, if you pull this in front of a judge, the judge is going to be like, yeah, the 93 verdict stands, like, see ya. Right? Like, this is not a no-brainer. It's not quite that easy. But it is offensive that this is the answer. Okay, so here's the answer.
Unfortunate that this member continues to not understand how important this health emergency is. We have been working as a government to make sure...
Why aren't you on team the government? We're working for you. Why do you have to be so skeptical? Why do you ask so many questions? 680 News is reporting Ontario has announced a new emergency measure to allow hospitals to transfer patients to long-term care or retirement homes without their consent. Yay! Yay. Isn't that wonderful? So now, okay, there's a couple of things here to unpack. One of the things that happens in the Ontario long-term care homes is you get put on a list. And if you have a top three, let's say you have top three homes that you want to go to. So if you go to the hospital and then they're going to send you back to long-term care, they're going to send you to long-term care in the first place because you need more care. And say you've been in the hospital for months or whatever, and your home has been sold or the rent has been handled by your kids or something to that effect. So you don't have anywhere to go. You're sitting in the hospital. They want to put you into a temporary long-term care facility, and the temporary facilities maybe aren't so great. And so there's whistling and I'm tempted to go and tell them to stop, but it doesn't matter. So the long-term care facility, you have a choice between 5, and sometimes the ones that are open aren't the best ones. And so you don't want to go to those ones. If you get put in those ones, you could sit there for a year waiting for one of your top 3 to open up. So people will wait in a hospital, taking up a hospital bed to get to their preferred bed. Now, recently, I believe they announced that if you get moved out of a hospital bed to one of these undesirable facilities, you don't lose your spot in line. You would still get access to the preferred slot position, even from the other long-term care home. You'd just be moved. Now, I'm suspending my disbelief on that, but I think that that's what this is for. That's the issue it's trying to tackle. But it doesn't play well. It doesn't play well in the media because people don't understand the implications and the details of it, right? And it's a hard system to navigate. So having to navigate this difficult system at a difficult time, because if your parents are sick or if you're accessing long-term care, probably they've been going that direction for a little while. You've been making plans, getting on lists. The lists take years. It's years, right? Like, and that's the reason why there's not so many hospital beds, because people are taking up those beds because it takes so long, right? So that's the problem they're trying to fix. Is it right? Is it the right move? They haven't made a right move yet. Like, they haven't made a right move yet, but they need to fix that problem. There are problems they need to fix across the board, right? And so you can't just sit and not do anything. It's a move to fix a problem, but again, it doesn't play well. So it's interesting to note. The other problem is, in the same line with regards to permission, they're moving critical care and ICU patients from places like Toronto to Kingston or wherever. Now, I don't think they're moving COVID positive patients, but they're moving sick patients from different places for staffing purposes, for overwhelming purposes, to manage the need, right? To manage the demand, not the need. Yeah, demand and need. And so that's notable, right? But what they're doing is, if you live in Toronto and somebody gets moved to Kingston, that's a really long drive. You've got to get an apartment, a hotel room or something to that effect. You've got to get housing while you're there because you can't stay at the hospital. You've got to get food and all of that other stuff. Whereas before you could stay home. Now there's other complications, and this is all being done without consent, right? In the strictest sense. So it's the lack of ability to be in control and that people are upset with. And they're not doing anything to fix that. So this government has a really big problem with communicating with the public. And what comes out is not well understood. And I mean, the science table is a complete disaster. It's an absolute disaster. It is like, on a scale of 1 to 5, it's an 11. Like, it is a disaster. It is not functional. It is not believable. The people who are running it are cartoonish and mean, and they don't seem like nice people. They seem like Doofenshmirtz. They seem like a caricature of a bad guy who can't be real. Like there was Dr. Warner or Dr. Fistman, I think it was Warner, he was the younger looking one, was talking about why the paid sick days will help. And he had this whole thing, and I couldn't even watch the video. I was just like, you're not believable. You just sound like a condescending prick, excuse my language. Really. And I couldn't watch it. I was like, I'm not doing this. They're not believable. It's been an unmitigated, total disaster. The only way to fix it is to completely clean house. Fire them all. Drop the PCR rates, say we made a terrible, catastrophic error and we're very sorry, and maybe you start fixing some trust in Ontario. Otherwise, if they continue this shit, I don't know. And I don't know the way out. I'd love to find the way out. I'd love to see the way out. But here we are. Ontario's Attorney General moving to another catastrophe that we watched unfold in Calgary and that will start unfolding in Ontario very soon. Derek Sloan is saying Ontario's Attorney General is looking to seize and bar entrance to Almer's Church of God, just as Alberta did to Grace Life Church. This isn't about your health. It's about enforcing compliance to tyrannical charter violating government overreach. And that's true. So yeah, they're writing to basically take ownership of the church and shut it down until the limits no longer apply under the Reopening Ontario Act. The Reopening Ontario, we should petition the government to rename the Reopening Ontario Act to the Closing Down Ontario Systemically Act. The shutting down of Ontario's economy until it no longer functions properly act. The Doug Ford is failing as a premier act. Can we rename it? We can. Sure we can. Government works for us, right? Let's petition our MPs. Mental health. Okay, we're going to move over to the redacted version of the show now. So heading over to Rumble and Odysee and BitChute. I try and upload to all of them. Sometimes what happens is I push yes, and then it asks me another question, and I'm like, I do all of it myself, and I'm taking care of kids. So sometimes I miss things. So apologies. There was one day I turned on BitChute, and yesterday's episode was sitting there waiting to be uploaded, and I was like, darn it, these things happen, right? So anyway, I'm going to go say some things that YouTube doesn't like, because YouTube is getting more and more sensitive every day. Don't forget to join my mailing list as well. I am going to fix everything that's wrong with it. I moved servers. Oh, there's a whole story. I'm not going to get into it now, but join the mailing list if you're interested in hearing from me, just in case YouTube shuts me down. And I'm going to be launching a weekly newsletter soon, and I've been talking about it for a while, but haven't teased it this week because I feel bad for not being able to fix it. I can fix it. I know what's wrong now, but I'm waiting to hear back from the support from my server. Anyway, regardless, it's all good. So join me on the alternate channels to watch the redacted show, and thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.